Now I'm just hopefully sharing there a bit of a timeline. So I thought what I'd start off doing today, because we've been given 15 minutes each to kind of go through what we have done at our institutions around what we've called an HDR capability framework, but it's actually like a research and development framework. Um, and the University of Sydney is a little bit different from most of the universities across Australia, because when I came into post, we didn't have a graduate research school. And so it was in 2023 that the Graduate Research School was actually approved as a strategic initiative. And we appointed our director, who many of you will know. And in 2024, we had hoped that we would be given permission to roll out the entirety of the Graduate Research School. But as you know, it isn't the best time in the sector. And so we were only given permission to do a phased approach and to implement stage one. And stage one was actually around functions that hadn't happened at the University of Sydney to date, which were to do with HDR development, HDR internships, and HDR supervisor training. So we previously hadn't had any staff centrally in those areas. And so that's what we were given permission to do. That's what we were funded to do. And I guess we felt that to some degree we might have been only given part of it, but we would never mind take the lemons that they gave us and make lemonade out of it. So one of the things that we've done in this year, as we've had a year of consolidation, is to really focus. Can everyone just put their mics onto mute, please, because there's some background noise. So in 2025, we've aimed to really focus on the student experience. We've overhauled our entire policy suite, which, as you can imagine, has been quite a delight. And we have a new website and have a capability framework that we have launched that I'm going to talk about today and show you how we've kind of tried to have a very light touch in terms of bringing this to the university. And hopefully next year we will be given permission to move ahead with the rest of the graduate school. So this is our HDR capability framework. Just to let you know, I really have to give a lot of thanks to my director, Edwina Gross, and also to Claire Jackson, who we hired from the WE consultancy to really look at benchmarking what happens across the sector and to try and consult with our key stakeholders to get something that was really University of Sydney specific. And one of the things that she came up with was that everyone at the University of Sydney felt that training our HDR cohort was really about leadership. And so we came up with 4 pillars around this. And one of the things that we're really hoping that this capability framework is helping us to achieve is to change the culture at the university, where our supervisors really think that what they're there to do is to supervise a project over 3.5 years that produces a number of papers so that people can be competitive at the end. And we're trying to really change that to put the emphasis on the fact that what we're doing through training in a PhD is actually training people, not projects. So we are training people to become independent researchers and to be able to take roles in many different sectors of society. And so we're encouraging this framework to be a bit of a resource for supervisors and students to talk right from the beginning of the student's candidature about the things that are important. And we have these 4 pillars, and we purposefully put one at the top, which is called leading yourself with others. And this is really about trying to acknowledge that if you are to be a real research leader, whether in academia or industry, education, health, or any other sector, you first of all need to stay well and be resilient. We know that our students that don't stay well and be resilient are students actually who are much less likely to finish with an outstanding thesis and on time. It really requires you to collaborate and connect with others and network. And we want to help our students to learn these kinds of skills that will be really showing leadership skills and leadership skills in a way that will allow them to lead people when they leave here in whatever walk of life that they go through. So we really want to think about this as the absolute foundation on which all the other aspects of a PhD training is built. The second is leading your research. And this is, I guess, what our academics are much more familiar with and they're really comfortable with. You know, they understand that it's their role in the schools and the faculties to train the students in the deep expertise of the area, to be able to help them with the academic writing that is specific to that discipline, to be able to manage the project, to do ethics and safety in that discipline, and so forth. And so all of those kinds of research skills, if you like, we very much see as being happening with the students and their supervisors, and in the research, and in the faculties and schools. But the other two areas that we really wanted to get people to focus on right from the beginning, we called leading with impact and leading your career. We really wanted to get the students and supervisors talking right from the beginning about who are actually the end users of this research. The research that you're doing, who's going to be interested in the results, and how are you going to be able to make that impactful? Do you need to build industry connections? Do you need to innovate and translate things into research? Do you need to understand commercialization? Do you need to teach and inspire? Do you want to be a science communicator? Do you want to be able to get this out to the communities that you're working with? This will very much differ depending on the nature of the research. And we want to get students and supervisors thinking about this from the beginning to allow them the capacity for the students to develop the skills that are going to help them to communicate their research with impact as the results come to light. And then finally, we want to get students really thinking about, right from the beginning, growing their career through continuous improvement. And I think what we really hope is that we get students starting to think about crafting their own professional identity. We don't want students to become the clones of their supervisors. We want them to think about where they're headed, what they hope to do, what sort of a professional identity that they want. And we want them to adopt a kind of mindset of continuous skill development that will really help them to kind of plan their career. So this is in a really brief, the framework that we came up with all the different capabilities. And I guess where we see ourselves fitting into this as the graduate research school is that at the University of Sydney, we're a really large, complex organisation, like most of your universities will be, or certainly many of them. And what we want is at the centre of what we do to be all about the student. You know, what kind of a researcher did they want to be? And we know that the faculty and school are the ones that immediately surround them, providing them with the support that they need to learn their research craft, for the want of a better word. And we as the Graduate Research School really want to kind of wrap around the outside of the school and faculty and be a conduit to all the wonderful opportunities that actually at our university were already available to students, but they were not really aware of them, and therefore they were not really taking them up in a way that they could have to really ensure that they were developing professionally in a way that was consistent with their values and where they want to be. So we link them to all these different services where they offer different training opportunities, different networking opportunities in different areas, and different support opportunities, sometimes for specific cohorts. And so what we've tried to do is actually to embed these into what we call our capability framework in training. In action. And I'm going to have to stop the share and reshare just to show you what that is. But we're pretty happy with how that kind of came out. So if you just bear with my lack of skills at this point in the presentation, and oh gosh, I'll just copy that, get up the Google and share it. She says optimistically. go. Oh gosh, it's going to make me do this. This is annoying. Two-factor authentication is going to drive me nuts. Sorry about this. 942. Hopefully this will be in it and I can share it immediately. Go back to Zoom. Yeah, so let me just share that. Framework. So what we now have on our website is what we call the HDR Capability Framework in action. And what we can do here is, you see, we have all our upcoming opportunities for training now can be accessed by the students. And so, for example, if you decide that what you're interested in is that you'd like some capabilities in this area of leading yourself with others, we then have all these opportunities that the students can actually go to, where, for example, they want to stay well during their degree. There's an opportunity that they can register and get more information for. If they want to look at balancing work and life kind of expectations, they can go there. If they want secrets to successful research students, and so on. So that all of the different capabilities are mapped onto our website with up-to-date training opportunities that the students and their supervisors can plan what they would like to do and avail themselves of that. So I will just very finally end sort of on that point before I hand over to Jonathan, and just make 3 points really. The first is that we really wanted to develop a capability framework so that it fostered real and genuine, authentic researcher development that could actually be tailored to the student and their needs, so that every PhD could be nuanced to where the student wanted to go and what their research was about. We think that it will offer a really good resource to the students and their supervisors to discuss their plans and needs right from the beginning of the candidature. And for my team, it really provides a roadmap for what sort of training that we want to provide, where we've been able to map all the training across the University of Sydney so that it's there and available for the students. But we can also then identify gaps and develop trainings that will, add to the opportunities already available. So I'll stop sharing my screen and hand over to Jonathan.
All right, thank you, Louise, and that was really great. And in fact, I feel like I'm just going to repeat a bunch of stuff, which is probably a good thing, right? But firstly, I should also just acknowledge that this work I'm going to present today is actually also the work of Professor Penny Martins. And for those who don't know, she has left the university, so she's shortly to be the Pro-Vice Chancellor of HDR at UTS, and I know she's in the audience today. And so, yeah, Penny and I have together with the GRS have worked on our framework. And I think that what Louise has talked about is really resonates really strongly with me. And what I thought I'd do is do a little bit of a history lesson in some of the things that we've done because we've been a GRS for a significant time. And when I became Dean in 2019, we did have this HDR Extend type of framework here. And you can see a little bit familiar to probably what Louise talked about a little bit about helping you navigate your candidature and explore skill development opportunities and career options with various stages going through it. And part of that sort of extend was to get people to identify their strengths and weaknesses, think about their skills and career development goals they might want, and then identify opportunities to build those skills. And you can see in the categories down the bottom there are 6 sort of pillars there. And I would say that this is a work in progress. I mean, I think it's not that Penny's leaving that I'm changing it. We've been talking for another couple of years of how do we best use this framework in a way that's perhaps more relevant. And I guess what really shaped that thinking was thinking about the challenges for candidates. And obviously, they're balancing so many responsibilities and obviously trying to do many complex methodologies and tools. Obviously, there's a lot of research stuff that they need to do, like literature and that. But I guess one of the things that really stands out for me is supervisors prioritizing research over development, and this is something Louise has just mentioned. And again, this lack of approval for career development sessions is something where the ownership of a student is obviously a big problem, I think, in the sector of trying to get people to understand that we're trying to build future research leaders. So in terms of our sort of overall arching thing, this is sort of where we are at the moment, where we obviously have our research integrity and research data management. I'm sure everyone has those types of modules. We have a first year onboarding type program, which I'll briefly talk about. We have a series of interactive webinars and workshops and self-paced online modules. And I think that the key thing though is that's great for the candidate, but I also think that one of the key things we need to think about is how do we actually help supervisors help their candidates? That you can do policies and procedures and all those things and provide workshops, but you really should be embedding everything in everything we do. Like we really should, as I think Louise has very carefully enunciated, that it's actually about building the system together so that people can actually recognize that as a supervisor, my candidates going on and being successful is a reflection on me. And so therefore that's, even if it's just in self-interest, it's actually a very useful way of. So one of the things we recognized is that after sort of rethinking after COVID and things of how things were going, is we recognized that most of our first years are not onboarded properly. So in the last couple of years, we've really worked hard on trying to make sure that we get all our commencing candidates to have a proper induction into the degree. And that's not just at the GRS level, but actually at the school and faculty levels. And so while schools will often do some things, often we found across UNSW, not every faculty was really building that cohort. And again, to me, it's critical that schools and faculties are engaged. So we've built this comprehensive sort of onboarding program. It touches on various topics, but it's to try and give everyone a strong base, as well as some discipline perspective on key training components. And so we've been doing that now for a year or so, and I think it's starting to really pay off in terms of candidates actually knowing who else is in their school or their faculty in a way that perhaps they didn't before. What a lot of shaped my thinking though in terms of these types of frameworks is actually looking at the Senior PhD program. For those who are relatively new, this was a program we introduced in 2017. It was a new way of recruiting and targeting applicants. It had, at the time, a significant stipend and also a 4-year candidature. But one of the really key things of the scheme was that extra time was there to help people with career mentoring and career development. So there was actually funding associated with that career development, and $10,000 a year for 4 years is a significant amount of money. And one of the things we learned from this system, from doing the Senior PhD program, is that most supervisors have no idea how to do this, right? They really struggled with the mentoring aspects. They really struggled to really talk to people about what might be the key thing for a candidate to think about. And that really has shaped, I think, our thinking as we go forward, because most of them thought it was just about sending people off to conferences and doing all those research bits. But as Louise has talked about, it's actually spending some time to think about what are the things that a particular candidate might need. And so great examples we had in the Scientia were people who felt that they wanted to be able to present better. So they spent some time at NIDA getting training there on how to present, and have then since gone on to great careers where they've been pitching their research and things like this. So the Scientia really sort of formed the base of realizing that we have to bring our supervisors along with our candidates. And so that meant the reshaping of Essentials of Supervision was the first thing we did. I mean, really have developed that program to not just introduce policies and procedures, but actually get academics to think about how they're going to support their candidates, not just in their research, but in the development and the training needs analysis and things like this. And so all through the workshops that we run is a strong emphasis on how supervisors can support their candidates. The next thing that we did was we often give out money at the GRS level to go and do travel and various things like this. But again, COVID sort of highlighted that that was not necessarily easy to do. So Penny and I took some time to think about how we might reshape that. And so we introduced a development and research training grant in 2022. And this is centrally funded. It's a grant in aid, and it's there to actually help provide that funding for profile building, skill development activities. Yes, you can attend conferences, but also things like childcare to actually help, support, attendance at activities. But the key part of this was, and certainly the first year we ran this was quite challenging. But what we really started to develop was that to actually get the money, you had to articulate a career development strategy as part of the application, and that had to be done with the supervisors. And I think within a year or so, we've seen a transformation of how people are thinking about this money and how it might be used. That they are picking a conference for a particular reason rather than that it happens to be in Portugal or somewhere cool. There is actually a lot more sort of, thoughtfulness about what they're doing. And we've had some feedback, just, very briefly, some people just saying that, these are the supervisors giving feedback on how, help the candidate think about their leadership roles, how they might, develop their skills and things like this. And so we view that as a really, good development that's, we continue to build. We've also done a series of career development workshops, and these came out of the Scientia program. They were part of the program when we ran it, and we've extended those out to all candidates now. And again, much of this is, I'm sure most of us have some elements of this, but again, I think it's very much that centered at the candidate, thinking about them, and rather than just collecting, training certificates and things like that, actually getting them to reflect on where they want to be and what they might need to do to get there. And so all of these are things that, these workshops are all there to try and drive those conversations. And the second one there is actually a panelist type discussion, getting people to share experiences. And again, that practice sharing aspect, I think, is a really critical part of this. So where to next for us? I mean, I think, what I really need to do now is to, keep working with the schools and faculties to actually develop the HDR Extend framework in a way that, I think is meaningful. And I say Louise's presentation resonates really strongly with me. I also think we have to continue our supervised development programs for our experienced supervisors, for again, getting that emphasis on candidate support and development. And indeed, we are rolling out an impact and engagement, course for first years next year as a way of, again, of trying to get people to think about why they're doing the work and how that might help build their careers. And obviously at USW, we're very strong in our entrepreneurship. We've tried a few ways of trying to do this. We had an entrepreneurial HDR program. Big problem we had there was no one did it, or if they did, they never finished it because they were too busy setting up companies and things like this. But I think what we recognize there is that, again, these are conversations you have at the supervisor candidate level, sometimes at the school and faculty level, to try and help people think about, broaden their horizons and actually think about where they might want to go to next. Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. We'll hand over to our Macquarie colleagues. So Simon, Jen and Karen.
Thanks, Tracy, and thanks very much for the invite today. So I think Karen is going to be driving the slides. I'm actually going to be making quite a short contribution today because this is very much a team effort. So I'll provide a little bit of the background to the graduate research development framework. Then I'm going to pass on to Jen Cornish, who's going to introduce the framework, and then Karen, who's going to talk about the implementation. Next slide, please, Karen. Okay, so just give you a little bit of background to and context. So the research development framework is grounded within the broader Macquarie research strategy. Our broad aim is to develop the world-ready leaders and thinkers of tomorrow. And that chimes very much with Louise's focus, I think, on what we're trying to do within graduate research, which is supporting the leadership skills of our graduate researchers. And there are 4 components to that research strategy: attracting high potential graduate researchers, developing world-ready graduate researchers, providing an exceptional graduate researcher experience, and engaging externally through graduate research for mutual benefit, both in terms of graduate research career development, but also in terms of external engagement in research. And I think these last 3 goals are very much linked to the development of an appropriate graduate research development framework that guides the sort of skills that our candidates, can develop and need to develop as part of their graduate research programs in order to become world-ready graduate researchers, in order to have an exceptional experience, and also to build the skills to be able to engage externally in an effective way. So our sort of goal was to develop a forward-looking and a distinctive, a unique graduate researcher development framework for Macquarie. By forward-looking, what I mean is a framework that is focused on what graduate researchers want to achieve in their future research careers. So not just about the skills that they need in order to be successful in their PhDs or their Masters of Research, but the skills that they need to develop in order to then take those skills and those capabilities to the next level in their future careers. Karen, can I have the next slide, please? Now, some of this background I think is obvious to all of us, but of course, when I went into graduate research, everybody who was doing a PhD had an expectation that that was a direct pathway to a career in academia. And I'm a psychologist, so psychology was expanding exponentially at the time, and most of my PhD colleagues ended up in a career in academia. I think things have changed dramatically, as we all know, particularly in the Australian sector, but also worldwide. And of course, at least 50% of our graduate researchers work outside of academia in a range of different contexts. And in the long term, that percentage is going to be much higher. What we know from the research is PhD graduates often lack a clear recognition of their skills and abilities, might be unaware of careers outside of the academy and also how to pursue them. And what graduate research development frameworks enable is that they enable and support our graduate researchers to articulate the sorts of skills that they develop in engaging in a PhD. The ability to manage projects, the ability to work within teams, the ability to independently lead a project, etc. We also know that employers have mixed attitudes to employment of PhD graduates. So some employers, based on some research from the Council of Canadian Academies, some employers believe PhD graduates lack certain attributes such as adaptability, practicality, teamwork skills, capacity to collaborate, and to take multiple perspectives. Now, I don't believe that that's the case, and I think most of our graduate researchers actually, develop those skills very effectively, but often don't recognize that they're developing them as part of engaging in their PhD work. Next slide, Karen, please. So what we did, and this is a 2-year project, is we looked at a range of skills taxonomies and research development frameworks, and we drew upon all of those in developing our own unique framework at Macquarie. Of course, Vitae is the most well-established. I think in some respects, it's a great framework if you want to become a researcher. It's a great framework if you want to become a researcher in academia. But of course, it doesn't just cater for PhD students. It also caters for early career researchers, mid-career researchers. It has developed beyond its simple roots, and is now extraordinarily complex and overly detailed, in my opinion. And we were looking for a framework that was much simpler and much easier to navigate. But nevertheless, we drew upon many of the principles of Vitae, which are really, really good in informing our framework. We also, just about 6 months after we started this work, the World Economic Forum Global Taxonomy of Skills was published. That was developed through consultation with a range of global industry leaders, and it represented the skills that group forecast will be highly valued in industry in the future. And that's what I mean by future looking. We wanted to think about those sorts of skills and then how those skills map onto a graduate research program, and what sort of skills we might need to provide and additional training we might need to provide in order to fill some of the gaps that have been identified by employers as being really valuable for the future workforce. We also drew upon Boyer's 4 areas of scholarship. This underpins Macquarie's promotion criteria. It incorporates four components: teaching and learning, integration, the ability to integrate insights from a range of different disciplines, application, the capacity to think about how your research can be applied and also the impact that it has, and also discovery, basic discovery. We drew upon the mindset study, a European research study, which identified employability requirements in industry and the gaps for graduate researchers, and also the Eurodoc framework. It's the Eurodoc skills report, which was a multi-country meta-study of developmental frameworks of graduate researchers. So we really looked broadly at what was out there, and then we try to capture the key elements of all of these taxonomies in informing the graduate research and development framework that we developed. And I'm going to pass on now to my colleague, Professor Jen Cornish, who's going to present that. Thanks, Jen.
Thank you very much, Simon. And as Simon said, look, it took 2 years. We had, in addition to those considerations and taxonomies, we also consulted a lot within our team and also with faculties to come up with this final framework that we have in front of us now. So as Simon mentioned, we wanted to keep it simple, but also complex in its own little way. So the simple way of looking at it is through the domains. So we have the 4 domains of think, grow, deliver, and lead. We decided that that was easier for the students to understand and would be easier for them to, sorry, not understand, but to remember, I think is probably the better thing to say than to understand. So underneath these 4 domains, we have 10 subdomains, which I'll talk about in a minute. So the main thing I wanted to focus on here is for the 4 domains. Think is essentially the academic aspects of the PhD. So it took us ages to wordsmith this, so I'm going to read out each of our descriptions. So for think, it was the knowledge, skills, and strategies to conceptualize, analyze, and deliver fresh perspectives and creative solutions to global challenges. With grow, that's more like what Louise was talking about with understanding the student resilience and getting them to grow personally. So looking at their personal growth, but also their growth with respect to what career they want. So this is looking at the personal qualities to self-manage, build effective relationships, develop networks, and target opportunities relevant to personal aspirations. The third one there is deliver. So for deliver, this is essentially a rigorous project management skills. So it's looking at, sorry, the comments are going over it. It's looking at the knowledge and skills to plan and execute ethical and sustainable projects with integrity and professionalism. And then last, but definitely not least, is getting them to understand what leadership is. So looking at how they may lead in their research field or whatever career they decide to go into. So this was the leadership and communication skills to influence ideas, disseminate information, and drive solutions to cultural, social, and environmental challenges. So that is our framework to basically to support skill development throughout the graduate researchers' journey in order for them to succeed. Karen, the next one, please. The next slide shows you our subdomains. So as I said, there are 10 subdomains and there are 30 skills that underpin these subdomains. I'm not going to go through all the skills, but I did want to just highlight what the subdomains are. So in the think domain, we have knowledge and research strategies. We have innovation, creativity, and discovery, and also digital and technology, which is becoming more and more important in today's research world. In growth, we have, as I was talking about, the resilience, so looking at their self-management and also their career development, thinking about where they want to go to next. Doesn't have to be academia, as Simon was talking about. There's a lot of other positions out there. For deliver, we have project planning and delivery, and then, of course, responsible research. So making sure that they do conduct their research in an ethical and responsible way. Last, we have lead. So for this, we have 3 subdomains. We have communication and information exchange, leadership and social influence, and then global citizenship and civic responsibility. So really getting them at the forefront of where they want to be and understanding how they can actually lead their career going forward. Next one, please, Karen. All right, so the GRDF, or the Research and Development Framework, is supported by our Graduate Researcher Development Program, which Karen will talk about in a minute. So this program is embedded in our graduate researcher journey. So we've thought about their journey and how coming into it, obviously you've got their commencement, and then they explore and plan, progress and develop. What we want them to do is review what they're doing with respect to their skill development, and then help them to transition into the workforce. So we have an onboarding process, and we're now working on an offboarding process. But in the middle here, we have what Karen's going to talk more about, which is getting them to understand how to do lifelong learning and have that continuous skill development. So we've implemented milestones such as their confirmation of candidature and also their annual progress review, where doing that, they get to set goals and learn what skills they want to build in a particular year, and then reflect on their development and then set goals for the next year. So hopefully this will aid them to understand what skills they need and how they'll transition into their workforce or into their career pathway. So with that, I thought I'd pass over to Karen, because she is the gem of building this graduate researcher development program within our iLearn site. So I'll leave that to Karen to discuss now. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. So as Jen mentioned, our Graduate Researcher Development Program is built in our iLearn site. So that's our learning management system, which is based on Moodle. And this was selected so that students would have a familiar setting to go into, a system that they don't have to learn a new system. They've used iLearn through their undergrad and hopefully their master's degree. It'll be a familiar place, and it was also cost neutral. So that was a big benefit for us. So once students come into the landing page, they're provided with guidelines on how to complete the program and work through each of the steps. And the very first step is to check their skill gap analysis. So we've created and embedded within the program 4 different skill gap analysis, one for each domain. And this is opportunity for the students to go through and get a check of where their skill levels are currently at. So within each skill gap analysis, every subdomain and skill has their own page. And on that page, we have a definition of what the skill actually means, so students understand what we're talking about by that particular skill. And we provide 4 different level statements for students to self-reflect and select at which skill level they think they're currently at. We don't detail the levels here for them because we don't want them to be swayed by level classifications. They've just got to reflect on their choice and where they think they sit. At the end of the skill gap analysis, students are provided with a report. And on the report, they'll see where they sit for each skill and subdomain on their current skill statement, and then they'll get a skill level, and then they'll get the next level up so they know what to aim for to develop their skills. They'll also get an overall domain skill level so they can get an idea where they sit for that whole domain as well. At this point, the students can go back into the program and go down to our skill set, select a particular skill that they're interested in developing, and they'll get a list of suggested skill development opportunities that they can look at for an idea of where they can, what experiences they can do to develop their skills in that area. We also link out to MyRDC. So MyRDC is our calendar of workshop opportunities across the university. So anyone who's got development opportunities for graduate researchers will post them here, and students can link out to that. The link or search is filtered down to this specific domain, but students can filter any of our workshops by whichever domain they're interested in once they get there. Within the program, we also provide some skill development plans. So we have one development plan for all graduate researchers, and this is a suggestion of the different types of activities they can do across their degree to develop their skills. They're not mandatory, but they're there to help develop the skills as the student goes along. But then we also have 4 focused skill development plans. So we have entrepreneurship, research leadership, industry, and teaching. And these plans detail different activities and training workshops that students can undertake to develop skills specifically in those areas. So they become little experts, with their skills fully developed by the time they finish their degree within that one particular focus program. We also provide suggestions on how students can put that into practice as well, so they can do that during their degree and get that experience along the way. Students are also provided with an activity tracker. So one of the things we want them to do is to plan their goals and discuss those goals with their supervisor, hopefully as early as possible in candidature, and then at those checkpoints of your COC, your annual progress report throughout candidature. So we provide an activity tracker for students to list all the different activities they'd like to do and mark them off on the way through. And at the end of this, they can actually print this out and take it with them to a meeting with their supervisor and have a conversation around that. We also have an equivalent one for career strategy as well, where students can kind of identify the types of careers they're interested in and the development activities they'll do to relate to that as well. We then provide students with a skill development blog. So this is an area where students can do a reflective piece on their training and put down what they've learnt, why they did in the first place, so what interest in what they learnt through that activity, and how they think they'll help them in the future. So this is really thinking about, I've developed a skill, this is how I did it, and this is how I can use this in the future to start thinking about their career and applications processes. And coming very shortly, we are going to have the opportunity for students who do complete a set amount of workshops within each focus skill development plan to apply for recognition via the application form for a digital badge or a digital credential. And this will be something that they can put up on their LinkedIn profile, but also it will appear on their academic transcript. So the idea behind the program and the way it's been established is that if a student participates in all the activities on the way through, at the time of completing their PhD, they should have also, in line with finishing their thesis, developed and enhanced knowledge, skills, and their personal qualities. They should have an understanding of and the ability to articulate the skills that they have developed, which is where the skill gap analysis comes in articulating those different types of skills. They should have a digital portfolio through doing their reflective blogs and potentially digital credentials to go with that, so they're ready with a little toolkit there. Hopefully they've participated in some networking opportunities, and they may have research and professional networks set up, and ultimately be career ready. So they've got their toolkit of skills and they're ready to start applying for jobs and get out there in the workforce. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks, Simon and Jen and Jonathan and Louise. We'll now open the floor for questions. I notice there's been some back and forth in the chat. Maybe I'll throw it out with a question from Rachel Spronkin-Smith from Otago, who's actually a member of our ACGR Research and Development Framework Working Group. Rachel was wondering from the panellists, what degree of cultural intelligence is being included in the frameworks?
So I answered a bit in the chat and I'm happy to go first. So we do have as one of our capabilities under the Leading Yourself with Others thing as cultural competence. We're very lucky at Sydney. We have the National Cultural Competence Centre, I think the NCCC, who has some online training and face-to-face training our students can do. We also have an Indigenous Researchers Network that we run for Indigenous researchers across the university that HDR students are invited to, and that meets weekly if people want to, and they have a lot of invited speakers and so forth. So we do, and that's not only for Indigenous students, although obviously Indigenous students are invited, including international Indigenous students. It's also for people doing Indigenous research or generally interested in those approaches.
Anyone else have anything to comment on that? No?
I can say that our students do Macquarie training with respect to Indigenous cultural understanding. So that's one of the things that they do. It's in their induction, I believe. Karen, back me up on that one.
Sorry, yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions for our panel while we have them here? Feel free to raise a hand or post a question in the chat. Okay, so here's an interesting question from Megan. So what do our panelists see as the future of the frameworks?
I'm happy to. Oh, Simon, you go.
Look, I mean, I think I said in my presentation that I think what we're trying to do is develop a framework that's very much future proof. So someone that's aligned with what we know graduate researchers are going to be doing later in their career or predominantly. So I think that's key thing for me is just ensuring that we continually develop them to speak to what the future holds and what the new skills will be over the next 10 to 20 years, and things are likely to change. So I think what's really critical is continual review, continual updating, and continual responsiveness both to what changes within the research sector, within academia, and also in terms of externally.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Simon. And I also think that it's a really important thing for us as a sector to be doing. You know, I have said this before in this forum that I was really quite horrified in reading this strategic examination of research and development, where virtually the one line in the thing about higher degree by research is a statement that it hasn't changed in 50 years or something of that nature. And I think we really suffer from this myth that people who are not engaged in research and development in the graduate research space have, you know, because the PhD has the same title it had 50 years ago, they make the assumption that nothing has changed. And I think that having, you know, a research and development framework at a national level that is sufficiently flexible, that it's not prescriptive, so that people can actually adjust it to their own you know, university needs and wants, is really important, because it signifies that best practice absolutely includes the development of the researcher. And I think that that's you know, is a really important thing for us to do as a sector. And interestingly, and I think it was interesting to hear the presentations this morning, you know, I think you know, I mean, Macquarie's 4 pillars are really, you know, replicating a lot of ours as well, I think. Like, they're very overlapping. And we found that in the working group across all the frameworks that are available.
Thanks, Louise. Anais, you had a question?
Yes, kia ora. Thank you for those presentations. All 3 frameworks look really comprehensive. I'm with AUT. We're developing a framework also. And one of the challenges we come across is particularly for a generation of students who are living in a very high cost of living time, and in Auckland, a very high cost of living place. Very often our HDR students are working multiple part-time jobs. Some have young families. Research and development can fall into the I don't have time bucket. And I was just wondering if you can comment on how you make research and development flexible, time flexible and manageable for students who are juggling those multiple roles.
I mean, yeah, it's a challenge, and that's certainly one of the reasons why UNSW pushed really hard for higher, you know, stipends, just to try alleviate that problem in the first place, right? But I think again, I think you just got to embed it into, it's part of the PhD. It's not a extra piece of work, and I think that's what I was trying to articulate, was that, you know, we should be, you know, making sure that all of us are actually thinking about how to, you know, develop our researchers, and so it should be something that, you know, it's a chore. It should be something that should be just part of that PhD program, and so I think that also means you've got to then reimagine how long is a project meant to be, like, and so one of the things you see is people wanting to go longer and longer, thinking that therefore that'll make them more successful. But I always think that a PhD is a set period in time. You know, it's a project that you deliver what you deliver, and then you move on. And I think that's the mentality that you have to start to cultivate, that this is a stepping stone, not an end point.
I think it's also worth saying, particularly in relation to our framework, that we've mapped the sort of everyday activities that students engage with in as part of their PhD against the various skills. And I think that's important to acknowledge and recognize. And I think sometimes students don't realize that, you know, by going to a conference, by presenting at a research group, by planning their project, you know, writing a project plan, they're actually engaging in development work. They're building and developing skills. So it's not all about formal training. In fact, I think, you know, maybe 15% is about formal training, and the 85% is actually doing it and being supervised and guided in a really effective way. So that's that's the key thing, I think.
Yeah, and the only thing that I would add to that is we try to be really aware of having lots of different modalities for people to be able to do the training. So some online, some face-to-face, you know, some synchronous and so forth, you know, so that it does give people more options.
Can I also say that we don't mandate it yet? So this is something that the students want to actively engage in, and letting them understand that what the workshops that they're doing may actually enhance their efficiencies at such as writing or analyzing data. So it's letting them know the benefit of it as well, to make them encouraged to do the actual workshops on top of what they're already doing.
Right, we've got a couple of questions that are kind of interlinked in the chat. So I'll field one of those and then I'll pop over to Michelle. So we have a question around doctorates being supervised by industry partners, and how any of those industry links can be built on for more general researcher skills and career development. And at the same time, we've got a question from Danny, who's also in our ACGR working group, looking at do we have to think about supervisor training to evolve to help supervisors better prepare students for non-academic careers?
The answer to the last question is yes. I think that that's something that we certainly are looking at, but also, I mean, I think, you know, I would like to think we haven't been thinking about academic career for our graduates for quite some time. So I think like as Simon said, the skills that you develop just can be repackaged, and I think the Thesis Whisperer does a really good job, right, of articulating some of those things, that the tasks that we think are straightforward are actually, you know, important skills that people want. And then in terms of industry, you know, like we obviously have strong industry engagement programs. I think that's an important part, is get the supervisors from the industry to be involved. But again, I guess it should be something that is just built as a natural part of that program. And so again, it's like setting up a project is not just the actual, you know, physical doing the work. It's actually part of the entire, you know, program, is how do you know, help this candidate be in a research training environment, whether it's an industry setting or an academic setting.
I think one thing that we've done, and Karen mentioned it, is we've got the framework. We've got a series of provisions in terms of formal research training and less formal activities that contribute to the development of skills. Then on top of that, we've got a series of pathways that students can partake in. One of those is, you know, the industry researcher pathway, which is about collating a range of skills and experiences, which might include engagement with industry, internships, etc., which give them a badge when they complete their PhD, which acknowledges and recognizes that they have this collection of skills which are associated with being, you know, competent in those skills that require that sort of engagement with external partners. We've got an entrepreneurship badge, and we've got I think, is it an academic researcher badge? Is that right, Karen?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, so there's also a sort of way in which you can sort of put together components of skills in order to provide a, you know, if you like, a sort of capability set which are aligned with particular career aspirations that a student might have.
you. All right, Michelle.
Hi, thanks. A question from Macquarie again. I really love the fact that, you know, it's not just about the capability framework, but we're also assessing competency against that. So I know that you've got those competencies at the very beginning. Is there also a reflection piece at the very end in terms of how their growth and actually showing they're competent in those elements rather than just having a selection of workshops that they've completed?
Karen.
So we're currently working on an offboarding program that should hopefully capture a lot of that. But the badges that we have designed are around those skill development pathways that Simon was just talking about. So we're looking at incorporating a set amount of workshops within the badge, 6 hours dedicated to career development, or 6 workshops dedicated to career, and then a set amount of time dedicated to reflection. So students, through that process of applying for a digital credential or a badge, they don't just get it for completing the workshops. They have to do a reflection piece on all the different workshops they did, the skills they developed, also understand how it fits into their career plan, and the reflection is part of the big piece of it too. So they get whatever they do in that application towards their badge will become suitable to transfer into applications for jobs in the future. So they understand what they've developed, how they've developed it, what they've learned. Does that answer the question?
Yes, it does. So there's a reflection.
Yeah.
When did this launch? So I'm just asking about how embedded this has become to your program.
The badges will be launching
Okay.
within a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The program we started in 2024.
Okay.
We've had a fairly, I mean, we've been encouraging it through graduate research induction to highlight that this is for you guys. So targeting the new people coming in instead of the third years who are like, what is this? What's this thing? So doing it that way. So we've been having a fairly good uptake. So it's great so far. Good to see you too, Kit.
Yeah, nice, Jen.
All right, thank you, everyone. We've got a couple of questions in the chat, but unfortunately we've hit time. So if anyone would like a question asked of the panel that wasn't answered here, just shoot me an email and we can forward that through to people for you. Just quickly, if there are any last words from any of our panelists or any final thoughts before we go. Louise, Michelle, no, shake of the head from Jonathan? No? All right, well,
I'd just like to really thank everybody for their interest in this topic. I think it's super important. And, you know, I think if we can get this part right, you know, then we do really future-proof the PhD, you know.
Thank you so much for that, Louise, and all of this information and all of these approaches have been integrated into our thinking around what the ACGR Research Development Framework looks like to help support the sector more broadly. So we look forward to bringing that to you later in the year or early next year. Thank you to Jonathan, Louise, Karen, Jen and Simon for making the time to come and share your amazing research development frameworks and your implementation strategies with us today. Have a good afternoon, everyone, and we hope to see you in October for our October webinar.
Thanks, Tracy. Thank you, everyone.